The screaming metal tore through Earth's amber sky like a dying star, trailing smoke and sparks across the wasteland horizon. Dex's gray eyes tracked its descent from the cockpit of his patrol craft, his calloused fingers already dancing across the controls before conscious thought caught up. The alien vessel, sleek, crystalline, nothing like the rusted human settlements dotting the scarred landscape, careened toward the jagged peaks of the Thornback Mountains. "Control, this is Patrol 7, Dex's voice cut through static calm despite the chaos unfolding before him. "I have a confirmed alien craft going down in Sector 12, moving to investigate." His ship banked hard, following the trajectory of debris and flame. Below, the post-apocalyptic Earth stretched in all directions, a patchwork of radiation zones, twisted forests, and the skeletal remains of cities that once touched the sky. 50 years since the Great Burning, and humanity had learned to thrive in the bones of their broken world. They'd had to. The alien ship hit with a sound like thunder splitting stone. Dex circled the crash site, his sharp eyes cataloging the wreckage scattered across a narrow canyon. Smoke billowed from the main hull, but sections of the craft still gleamed with an otherworldly light. Movement flickered near the twisted nose. Survivors. He sat down on a stable ledge, grabbed his emergency kit, and rappelled into the canyon. The air stung with ozone, and something else, something alien that made his skin prickle. As he approached the wreckage, a figure emerged from behind a fallen boulder, auburn hair in a loose braid, medical kit clutched in steady hands. "Ellie?" Dex called out, recognizing the medic from his unit. "What the hell are you doing here?" "Heard the same crash you did," she replied, her green eyes flicking between him and the wreckage. Her voice carried that familiar sharp edge, tinged with urgency. "Was running supply drops in the eastern sector when this thing lit up the sky. Figured someone might need patching up." A low groan echoed from within the ship's hull, distinctly non-human. Dex's hand moved instinctively to his sidearm, then stopped as Ellie shot him a warning look. "They're hurt," she said simply, "whatever they are." Together, they moved toward the breach in the hull. The ship's interior was a maze of crystalline structures and flowing organic curves that seemed to pulse with dying light. In the central chamber they found them, 3 figures unlike anything in Earth's databases. The first was massive, nearly 7 feet tall, with leathery gray skin that rippled like water. His broad shoulders were slumped, black eyes unfocused as blue fluid seeped from a gash across his forearm. The leader, Dex realized, noting how the others oriented around him despite their injuries. The second survivor was smaller, more delicate, with shimmering eyes that caught the light in prismatic flashes. Her movements were quick, bird-like, as she tended to the third, a lean figure with mottled green skin who watched Dex and Ellie with narrow yellow eyes. "Easy," Dex said, hands visible, voice steady. "We're here to help." The large alien's head snapped up, those obsidian eyes focusing with predatory intensity. When he spoke, his voice was like gravel grinding against stone. "Humans." The word carried layers of meaning: surprise, wariness, calculation. Ellie was already moving, her medical training overriding any hesitation. She approached the injured leader, her hands moving in the universal language of healing. "This needs treatment," she said, examining the wound. "The bleeding's getting worse." "We do not need human assistance," the leader rumbled, but his words lacked conviction. Pain and blood loss were universal languages. "Maybe not," Dex replied, his gray eyes scanning the wreckage around them. "But you're going to get it anyway." He moved to the ship's communication array, or what was left of it. Twisted metal and shattered crystals told the story. They weren't calling for help anytime soon. The smaller alien with prismatic eyes spoke in rapid, clicking syllables, her bristles twitching with agitation. The green-skinned one hissed something back, his yellow eyes never leaving Dex. "Your ship's dead," Dex announced, turning back to the group. "Communications fried, navigation's toast, and from the look of those hull breaches, you're not flying anywhere." He paused, letting that sink in. "But there's a human outpost about 40 miles northeast. Medical facilities, communication array, everything you need." The leader's scarred forearms crossed over his chest. "And why would you help us reach this outpost?" Dex met his gaze without flinching. "Because it's the right thing to do. and because 40 miles of post-apocalyptic wilderness isn't something you want to tackle alone, especially not injured. His voice carried quiet authority. This is our world. We know how to survive it. Survive? The green-skinned alien's voice was a sibilant whisper. Your planet is chaos. Radiation storms, predator packs, unstable terrain. What makes you think soft humans can guide us through such dangers? Before Dex could answer, a distant howl echoed through the canyon, long, mournful, and definitely not human. Ellie's hands stilled on her patient as all eyes turned toward the sound. Because, Dex said, his hand moving to tap the compass at his belt, we've been doing it for 50 years. He looked each alien in the eye. I can get you to safety, but we leave now before the scavenger packs pick up your scent. Another howl answered the first, closer this time. The decision was made for them. The large alien slowly uncrossed his arms, black eyes studying Dex with grudging respect. Very well, human, lead us through your broken world. He paused, something like a challenge in his voice. But know this, if you fail, we all die together. Dex nodded grimly, already calculating routes and hazards. Then I won't fail. He turned to Ellie, who was helping the injured leader to his feet. How mobile are they? The big guy's lost blood, but he'll hold up. The others have minor injuries. She glanced at the prismatic-eyed alien who was gathering small devices from the wreckage. They're tougher than they look. As they prepared to leave the crash site, Dex felt the familiar weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. 3 alien lives, plus Ellie's, depending on his ability to read the land, to find safe passage through Earth's scarred face. The wasteland didn't forgive mistakes, and neither would their pursuers, both human and otherwise, once word spread of alien survivors. But as he led them out of the canyon, his steady stride cutting through the gathering dusk, Dex felt something else. Determination. These beings would see what humanity was truly made of. They'd learn that Earth's children weren't just survivors, they were masters of their broken domain. The real test was just beginning. The first night was a lesson in Earth's casual brutality. Dex had led the group 3 miles from the crash site when the temperature plummeted 15 degrees in as many minutes. The post-apocalyptic sky, scarred by radiation clouds and chemical burns, shifted from amber to deep purple as twin moons cast their sickly light across the wasteland. Here, Dex said, indicating a cluster of weathered boulders that formed a natural windbreak. His gray eyes swept the perimeter, cataloging shadows and sight lines with practiced efficiency. We make camp. The large alien, who'd finally introduced himself as Torven, stood rigid, his massive frame silhouetted against the dying light. We should continue. Every moment delays our departure from this world. And every moment in the open after dark gets us killed, Dex replied, already unpacking his survival gear. His movements were economical, purposeful. You hear that? They all listened. In the distance, a chorus of howls rose and fell like a twisted lullaby. Closer, something skittered across stone with too many legs. Night stalkers, Ellie explained, her hands busy treating the prismatic-eyed alien's minor cuts. Pack hunters. They see heat signatures from miles away, and they don't distinguish between human and alien meat. The green-skinned alien, Vyss, he'd called himself, lounged against a boulder with deceptive casualness. His yellow eyes darted between Dex and the darkness beyond. Interesting that you know their patterns so well, he hissed, almost as if you've encountered them before. I have. Dex's voice carried no boast, just fact. Lost a good pilot to a pack last winter. They're smart, coordinated, and they don't give up. He looked directly at Torven, which is why we travel during daylight and shelter at night, non-negotiable. Torven's scarred forearms crossed over his chest, the universal gesture of alien skepticism. On our world, leaders prove themselves through action, not words. Good thing we're not on your world, Dex said, striking a small heating element that cast warm light in a tight circle. Here, leaders prove themselves by keeping people alive. The prismatic-eyed alien, Zara, chittered something in her native tongue, her bristles twitching with nervous energy. She'd been scanning their surroundings with a small device that pulsed with soft blue light. She says the electromagnetic readings are chaotic, Torven translated, his gravelly voice thoughtful. Interference patterns unlike anything in our databases. Radiation storms, Ellie said, glancing up from her work. They roll through every few days, fry electronics, scramble navigation systems, and cook anything without proper shielding. She gestured toward Dex, which is why we rely on analog navigation, compass, stars, terrain reading. Vyss's scarred face twisted into what might have been a smile. Primitive methods for a primitive world. Before Dex could respond, Zara's device erupted in urgent chirps. Her eyes flashed brighter as she pointed toward a ridgeline about half a mile south. There, silhouetted against the sickly moonlight, shapes moved with predatory grace. "Company," Dex said, his hand moving to his sidearm. The pack spread out along the ridge, too many to count, too smart to approach directly. "They'll test us, probe for weaknesses." "And if they find them?" Torven asked, his massive hands curling into fists. "They won't." Dex's confidence was absolute. He pulled out a small cylinder and twisted it. The device emitted a high-pitched whine that made everyone wince, except the alien pack, which suddenly began howling in distress and retreating from the ridge. "Sonic deterrent," he explained, shutting off the device. "Night Stalkers have sensitive hearing. Play the right frequency and they'll find easier prey." Torven's black eyes studied Dex with something approaching respect. "Clever, but what happens when the device fails?" "Then we adapt." Dex tapped his temple. "The wasteland teaches you that gear breaks, plans fall apart, and the only thing you can really count on is your ability to think faster than whatever wants to kill you." As if summoned by his words, a new sound echoed across the landscape, the deep rumble of engines in the distance. Dex's head snapped up, his body tensing. "Human vehicles," he said, already moving to extinguish their heat source. "Could be traders, could be raiders. Either way, we don't want company." They waited in darkness as the engine sounds circled their position, eventually fading toward the east. Only then did Dex relight their warming element. "This world of yours," Zara clicked, her translated words carrying bewilderment, "it seeks constantly to kill its own children." "Maybe," Dex agreed, "but we're still here, still fighting, still finding ways to thrive in the ruins." He looked at each alien in turn. "That's what I'm offering you, not just survival, but the knowledge of how to turn a hostile world into home." Vyss snorted, a sound like steam escaping. "And what do you gain from this generosity?" Dex was quiet for a moment, his gray eyes reflecting the heating element's glow. "Proof," he said finally, "proof that humanity deserves a place in whatever comes next, that we're not just scavengers picking through the bones of our old world, we're builders of something new." "Noble words," Torven rumbled. "We shall see if your actions match them." The night passed in tense watches, each member of the group taking turns at guard duty. Dex noticed how the aliens moved, how they interacted. Torven's authority was unquestioned, but not absolute. He listened to Zara's technical assessments and even tolerated Vyss's subtle challenges, a functional hierarchy built on competence rather than mere dominance. When dawn finally broke across the wasteland, painting the scarred sky in shades of orange and gold, Dex was already packing their gear. 22 miles to the outpost," he announced, checking his compass against the landscape. "If we maintain good pace and avoid the radiation zone to the north, we'll be there by evening." As they prepared to move out, Zara approached him, her prismatic eyes flashing with curiosity. "Your navigation method," she clicked, "it relies on magnetic fields, yes?" Dex nodded, showing her the compass. "Among other things, star positions, terrain features, wind patterns, you learn to read the land like a book." "But magnetic fields can be disrupted," she observed. "What then?" Before Dex could answer, his compass needle began spinning wildly. In the distance, dark clouds were building with unnatural speed, shot through with green lightning. "Then," Dex said, pocketing the useless compass and starting to walk with unwavering confidence, "you trust 50 years of experience and keep moving." Behind him, he heard Torven grunt what might have been approval. It was a start. The radiation storm hit like the wrath of a broken god. Dex had seen the signs, the way the air tasted of copper and ozone, how Zara's detection equipment screamed warnings in her alien tongue, the unnatural green veins of lightning that split the darkening sky. He'd pushed the group hard for 6 hours, following game trails and dry riverbeds that only a lifetime of wasteland navigation could reveal. Now, as sheets of radioactive rain began to fall and the wind howled like something dying, they huddled in a shallow cave that Dex had spotted from half a mile away, a dark slash in the cliff face that promised shelter. "Inside," he commanded, his voice cutting through the growing storm, all the way to the back. The cave was barely large enough for the 5 of them, carved from living rock by some long-ago flood. Torven had to duck his massive frame, and Vyss kept glancing toward the entrance as if measuring escape routes. Only Zara seemed fascinated rather than afraid, her prismatic eyes reflecting the eerie glow of the storm outside. "How long?" Ellie asked, checking her radiation detector. The device was clicking like an angry insect. 3 hours, Dex replied, settling cross-legged near the cave mouth. "Maybe 4. Depends on how much the upper atmosphere caught." Thunder crashed overhead, so close it seemed to shake the mountain itself. In its aftermath, a new sound reached them, the panicked howling of something large and afraid. "What was that?" Torven demanded, his gravelly voice tight with concern. "Ironhide bear," Dex said, not moving from his position. "Big as a ground car, mean as hell, but smart enough to know when to find shelter." He glanced back at the aliens. "Even the apex predators respect radiation storms." As if to prove his point, something massive crashed past the cave entrance, a blur of metallic fur and desperate motion, seeking its own sanctuary deeper in the mountain. The ground shook under its passage. "This storm," Zara clicked, her device painting her face in shifting blue light. "The energy readings are beyond our understanding. How do you survive such things?" "Carefully," Dex replied, "and with respect. The wasteland doesn't care about your plans or your schedule. It has its own rhythms, its own rules. You either learn to dance with them, or you die." Vyss's yellow eyes glittered in the strange light. "And yet you promised to guide us through this chaos. Was that merely human bravado?" Before Dex could answer, the storm's fury redoubled. Lightning struck the cliff face directly above them, and the cave filled with the stench of ozone and superheated rock. For a moment, the entrance was a wall of pure white light. When vision returned, a new shape stood silhouetted against the storm, human but wrong somehow. The figure's movements were too fluid, too predatory. Raiders adapted to the wasteland in ways that had cost them their humanity. "No way," Ellie breathed, her hand moving to her sidearm. The raider stepped into the cave, water streaming from patchwork armor made of salvaged metal and beast hide. His face was a ruin of scars and crude cybernetic implants, eyes replaced by glowing red sensors that swept the cave interior. "Well, well," the raider said, his voice a mechanical rasp. "What have we here? Tender meat hiding from the sky's tears." More shapes moved outside. How many? Dex couldn't tell through the storm's fury, but the raider's confidence suggested he wasn't alone. "There's nowhere to run," the raider continued, drawing a wicked-looking blade that crackled with electrical energy. "Storm's got the whole mountain locked down. Might as well make this easy on yourselves." Torven started to rise, his massive frame unfolding with menacing intent, but Dex held up a hand, a gesture so commanding that even the alien leader paused. "Easy, friend," Dex said to the raider, his voice calm and conversational. "Storm's bad enough without adding more violence to the mix. Why don't you find another cave? Mountains full of them." The raider's laugh was like metal tearing. "Because this one has you in it, and you—" He pointed the crackling blade at Dex. "You smell like opportunity." "Do I?" Dex's voice remained steady, but his gray eyes were calculating distances, angles, possibilities. "What kind of opportunity?" "The kind that pays well at the slave markets," the raider said, "especially exotic stock like your friends here." That was when Dex moved. His motion was pure wasteland efficiency. No wasted energy, no telegraphed intent. One moment he was sitting cross-legged, the next he was inside the raider's guard, his combat knife sliding between armor plates with surgical precision. The raider's blade fell from nerveless fingers as he collapsed, his cybernetic eyes flickering once before going dark. The whole encounter had lasted maybe 3 seconds. "Stay down," Dex commanded as voices shouted outside the cave, "all of you." The storm chose that moment to unleash another fury of lightning and thunder, turning the cave entrance into a strobing nightmare of light and shadow. In that chaos, more raiders appeared, 4 of them, weapons raised, seeking targets in the chaos. But Dex was no longer where they expected him to be. He moved like a ghost through the storm's fury, using every shadow, every flash of lightning. His knowledge of the terrain, even terrain he'd never seen before, guided him to handholds and footing that shouldn't have existed. When the next lightning flash faded, 2 more raiders lay still. The remaining 2 opened fire, their energy weapons painting the cave walls with deadly light. But shooting at shadows was futile, and Dex was already behind them, emerging from a crack in the rock that seemed too narrow for human passage. When the storm's noise finally subsided enough for speech, Dex was dragging the last raider's body out of the cave entrance. "How?" Torven asked, his voice filled with something like awe. "Practice," Dex replied, cleaning his knife on the dead raider's clothing. "And knowing that in the wasteland, hesitation kills." He looked back at his charges, noting their expressions. Shock from Zara, calculation from Vyss, grudging respect from Torven. Ellie just nodded. She'd seen Dex work before. "The storm's passing," Dex announced, checking the sky through the cave mouth. The green lightning was fading, replaced by the more natural grays of ordinary rain clouds. "We move in 20 minutes. As they prepared to leave their shelter, Zara approached him again, her prismatic eyes bright with curiosity. "Your species," she clicked. "You are not as we expected." "What did you expect?" Dex asked, shouldering his pack. "Prey," she admitted. "Your world is so hostile we assumed its inhabitants would be softer, dependent on technology, on shelter, on safety." Dex smiled grimly. "We used to be. 50 years ago, humans lived in climate-controlled cities, traveled in sealed vehicles, never had to read the sky for weather or the ground for predators." He gestured toward the cave entrance, where the storm's fury was finally dying. "Then the world ended, and we learned what we were really made of." As they emerged into the post-storm landscape, washed clean and gleaming with an eerie beauty, Torven walked beside Dex instead of behind him. "Your navigation," the alien leader rumbled. "In the storm, without instruments, you still knew the way." "The land doesn't change," Dex replied, his stride confident despite the unfamiliar terrain. "Storms pass, seasons turn, but rock is rock and water flows downhill. You learn to read the permanent things beneath the chaos." Behind them, Vyss's voice carried a new note of thoughtfulness. "Perhaps this world has not made its children soft after all." 17 miles to the outpost. The real tests were still coming. The discovery came at midday, when Zara's equipment should have been picking up the steady pulse of the human outpost's beacon. Instead, there was silence. "Impossible," Ellie muttered, checking her own communication device against the alien technology. "The outpost broadcasts continuously, emergency protocol. Even if they're under attack, the automated systems should be transmitting." They'd stopped for a brief rest in the shadow of a twisted metal spire, part of some pre-war installation that jutted from the earth like an accusing finger. The morning had been good. They'd made excellent time across relatively stable terrain, and Dex's navigation had kept them clear of both radiation zones and the territorial markings of the more dangerous predator species. Now, with 13 miles still between them and safety, the first real complication had emerged. Zara chittered something urgent, her device painting shifting patterns of light across her prismatic eyes. When she switched to translated speech, her words carried the weight of certainty. Jamming. Sophisticated, targeted, designed to block specific frequencies. Torven's massive frame went rigid, his scarred forearms crossing in that familiar gesture of suspicion. Jamming requires knowledge of the systems being blocked. "Could be the outpost itself," Dex suggested, though his tone suggested he didn't believe it. "Emergency protocol might include communication blackouts if they're compromised." "Or," Vyss interjected, his voice a sibilant whisper, "someone doesn't want us reaching help." His yellow eyes darted between the group members, lingering on each face with calculating intensity. The implication hung in the air like smoke, sabotage, from within. Ellie stood up abruptly, her medical kit clutched in white-knuckled hands. "You're suggesting one of us is—" "I'm suggesting we consider all possibilities," Vyss replied, that twisted smile playing across his scarred features. "After all, how convenient that a human patrol happened to witness our crash. How fortunate that rescue arrived so quickly." Dex's gray eyes remained steady, but his hand drifted toward his compass, a gesture Ellie recognized as his thinking pose. Convenient, maybe, but not impossible. Search and rescue protocols exist for a reason. Do they? Torven's gravelly voice carried new weight. Tell me, human, how many alien crashes has your species responded to? This is the first, Dex admitted. The first you know of, Vyss corrected, but perhaps not the first that's occurred. Zara's bristles twitched with agitation as she continued scanning the electromagnetic spectrum. Her device was painting increasingly complex patterns, and her translated words carried growing urgency. The jamming is adaptive, learning, responding to our attempts to break through. That changed everything. Basic jamming was crude, brute force, flood the frequencies with noise and hope for the best. Adaptive jamming required sophisticated artificial intelligence, the kind that learned from each transmission attempt and evolved countermeasures in real time. Military grade, Ellie breathed, but who would have access to... She stopped, her green eyes widening as the implications hit her. There were only two sources for that level of technology on post-apocalyptic Earth: the sealed vaults of the old government or alien systems. Our ship, Torven said, reaching the same conclusion. Our communication array may have been damaged, but the jamming protocols remained active. Protocols that would activate automatically in the event of a crash, Zara added, her eyes flashing with understanding. Standard security measure to prevent our technology from being captured. But Vyss was shaking his head, his yellow eyes gleaming with something that might have been amusement. No! Our security systems were designed to prevent outside access to our technology. This jamming is targeted outward, preventing our signals from reaching help. The silence that followed was heavy with suspicion and growing paranoia. Each member of the group was reassessing the others, looking for signs of deception, for tells that might reveal hidden agendas. Dex broke the silence with characteristic directness. Doesn't matter who's responsible, what matters is getting past it. He looked at each of them in turn. Can we bypass the jamming? Zara's device painted new patterns as she considered the question. Possible, but it would require getting close to the source, within a few hundred meters, and the jamming signature suggests the source is mobile. Following us, Torven concluded. Or leading us, Vyss added quietly. The metal spire above them groaned in the wind, a sound like ancient mourning. In the distance something howled. Whether in pain or hunger was impossible to tell. The wasteland was indifferent to their growing paranoia, but Dex could feel the group's cohesion beginning to fracture. We keep moving, he said, shouldering his pack. Whatever's causing the jamming, standing here won't solve it, and the longer we delay, the more dangerous this gets. You would have us continue blind? Torven challenged. Without communication, without support? I'd have us continue smart, Dex replied. The outpost isn't just a radio beacon. It's a physical location with physical defenses. If someone's jamming communications, they're trying to isolate us, make us vulnerable. The worst thing we can do is play into that by stopping here. As they prepared to move out, Dex caught Ellie's eye. She nodded slightly, the kind of communication that came from years of working together in crisis situations. She'd noticed it too, the way Vyss had maneuvered the conversation, planting seeds of doubt while positioning himself as merely the voice of reasonable caution. But suspicion was a luxury they couldn't afford, not with 13 miles of hostile terrain ahead and an unknown enemy potentially tracking their every move. As they left the twisted spire behind, Dex set a harder pace. His navigation was more aggressive now, choosing routes that offered cover and concealment over speed. Behind him, he could feel the tension radiating from the group. 3 aliens and 1 human, bound together by necessity but divided by growing mistrust. The jamming followed them, adapting to Zara's attempts to break through with increasing sophistication. And somewhere in the back of Dex's mind, a cold certainty was growing. One of his charges wasn't what they seemed. The question was which one, and whether he'd figure it out before it was too late. The trap was elegant in its simplicity. They'd made camp in a natural amphitheater of stone, carved by some ancient river that had since changed course. High walls on 3 sides, a single narrow entrance, and a clear view of the approaches. everything Dex's wasteland-trained instincts told him to look for in a defensive position. Everything except the fourth side, which he discovered too late, was riddled with concealed passages. The attack came at dawn, just as Dex was checking their bearing for the final 8-mile push to the outpost. Shapes burst from hidden crevices in the rock, more raiders, but these moved with military precision. No wild charges or intimidation tactics, just cold, professional violence. Dex rolled behind cover as energy weapons lit up the morning air, his mind racing through tactical options. 3 hostiles, maybe 4, positioned to control the choke point. Classic ambush formation, executed with the kind of timing that suggested, "Behind you." Ellie's shout spun him around just in time to see a raider emerging from a concealed tunnel not 20 feet away. Dex's knife was already moving, but the angle was wrong, the distance too great. Then Torven was there, his massive fist connecting with the raider's skull with a sound like breaking stone. The raider crumpled, his weapon skittering across the rocks. "How many?" Torven demanded, his black eyes scanning for additional threats. "Unknown," Dex replied, checking the fallen raider's equipment. "Military-grade gear, unmarked but well-maintained, but they knew we were coming." That's when he noticed the silence from the far side of their camp. Zara was pressed against the stone wall, her prismatic eyes wide with terror, her detection equipment forgotten at her feet. But it wasn't the raiders that had her frozen with fear. It was Vyss, standing calm and composed in the center of the crossfire, completely unharmed despite the energy bolts that had been searing the air around him. "Impressive reaction time," Vyss said, his sibilant voice carrying across the sudden quiet. "Though not entirely unexpected. Your reputation for survival is well documented, Dex." The pieces clicked into place with crystalline clarity. The convenient crash site, the sophisticated jamming that targeted both human and alien frequencies, the perfectly timed ambush in a location Vyss had suggested as their rest stop. "You," Dex said, his voice flat with certainty. "Me," Vyss agreed, his scarred face twisting into that familiar smile. Though to be fair, this was never personal, simply business. Ellie had her weapon drawn, but hesitated as more raiders emerged from concealment. Too many to fight, positioned too well to escape. They'd walked into a killing ground, guided by someone they'd trusted to lead them to safety. "The jamming," Torven rumbled, understanding dawning in his obsidian eyes. "You've been blocking our distress signals." "Among other things," Vyss replied. "Did you really think your ship's crash was an accident? That your navigation systems simply failed at the most convenient possible moment?" Zara's translated words came in rapid, frightened clicks. "Sabotage. He sabotaged our navigation, caused the crash." "Guilty as charged," Vyss said with mock regret, "though I prefer to think of it as creating opportunity. The Hegemony pays well for information about human capabilities and even better for proof of their weaknesses." "The Hegemony," Torven spat, the word carrying the weight of old hatred. "You serve our enemies." "I serve profit," Vyss corrected. "The Hegemony offered a better deal than our little science mission ever could. Intelligence about human survival capabilities, plus 3 live specimens for their research programs. Simple mathematics." Dex's mind was already working the problem, calculating angles and distances, looking for the flaw in Vyss's perfect trap. The raiders had them covered, but they were also close enough to each other to be vulnerable to area effects. If he could create enough chaos— "Don't," Vyss warned, noting Dex's subtle shift in posture. "You're skilled, I'll grant you that, but these aren't wasteland scavengers. They're Hegemony operatives, enhanced and equipped for this specific mission." To prove his point, one of the raiders stepped forward and removed his helmet. The face beneath was human, but wrong. Augmented with alien technology, eyes replaced by multi-spectrum sensors, neural implants visible beneath artificial skin. "Collaborative effort," Vyss explained. "The Hegemony provides the technology, human turncoats provide the local knowledge, everyone profits except—" he gestured toward Dex and his companions. "Well, except you." Ellie's voice was tight with controlled rage. "How long have you been planning this?" "Since before your ship left orbit," Vyss replied. "The crash, the rescue, your heroic guide leading us through the wasteland, all carefully orchestrated. The Hegemony wanted to see humanity in action. Test your adaptation capabilities under stress. You've performed admirably. Performed, Torven repeated, his voice like grinding stone. You speak as if this were theater. Isn't it? Vyss spread his arms wide, encompassing the trap-filled amphitheater. The noble humans proving their worth through adversity. The grateful aliens learning to respect their primitive but resourceful guides. A perfect narrative right up until the final act. Dex felt something cold settle in his chest. Not fear, but the absolute clarity that came in the moments before everything went to hell. Vyss had planned this perfectly, accounted for every variable except one. Dex hadn't survived 50 years in the wasteland by following other people's scripts. You're right, Dex said, his voice calm despite the trap that had sprung around them. He looked at Vyss, a grim smile touching his lips. You planned this perfectly, accounted for every variable except one. I haven't survived 50 years in the wasteland by following other people's scripts. Vyss's smile faltered, a flicker of something unreadable in his yellow eyes. The Hegemony operatives, their faces a chilling blend of human and alien augmentation, tightened their formation, energy weapons humming. Torven and Zara stood ready, their alien forms radiating a desperate defiance, while Ellie, her face a mask of grim determination, held her sidearm steady. The natural amphitheater, once a place of supposed safety, now felt like a coffin. You have no options, human, Vyss hissed, regaining his composure. Your technology is useless, your allies outmatched. Surrender, and perhaps your end will be swift. Surrender isn't in the human playbook, Dex retorted, his gaze sweeping the rock walls, the concealed passages, the positions of the raiders. He wasn't looking for an escape route. He was looking for a weakness, a single thread to unravel Vyss's carefully woven trap. His eyes landed on a small, almost imperceptible fissure in the rock face high above them, a place where the ancient river had carved a narrow vertical shaft. It was too small for a human, certainly too small for the hulking operatives, but it was there. Ellie, Dex's voice was low, almost a murmur, but sharp enough to cut through the tension. Flashbang, now, aim for the center. Ellie didn't hesitate. Her hand moved, a small cylindrical device arcing through the air. It landed with a soft thud amidst the clustered operatives, and before they could react, it detonated with a blinding flash and a deafening concussion. Chaos erupted. The augmented raiders, their multi-spectrum sensors overwhelmed, stumbled back, disoriented and shouting. Their energy weapons discharged wildly, searing the rock walls with uncontrolled bursts of light. Torven, Zara, move! Dex roared, already in motion. He didn't run from the raiders, he ran into them, a blur of motion. His combat knife, a blur of steel, found the weak points in their armor, the exposed seams of their cybernetic implants. He moved with the savage grace of a predator, a lifetime of brutal survival distilled into every strike. Torven, recovering from the flashbang faster than the human operatives, became a whirlwind of destructive force. His massive fists, honed by years of his species' own harsh environment, shattered armor and bone. One operative, trying to regain his footing, was met with a thunderous blow that sent him flying into the rock wall, leaving an imprint of his body before he slumped lifelessly. Zara, despite her earlier terror, was surprisingly agile. Her small, bird-like frame darted through the confusion, her prismatic eyes scanning for vulnerabilities. She didn't engage directly, but instead used a small, high-frequency emitter she'd retrieved from their crashed ship. The device, barely larger than her palm, emitted a focused sonic pulse that disrupted the operatives' neural implants, causing them to seize up, their movements becoming jerky and uncoordinated. Vyss, caught off guard by the sudden violent counterattack, scrambled for cover behind a large boulder. His sibilant curses filled the air as he realized his perfect trap was unraveling. Ellie, meanwhile, provided cover fire, her sidearm spitting controlled bursts of energy. She wasn't just shooting, she was targeting the exposed joints and less armored sections of the operatives, forcing them to break formation, creating openings for Dex and Torven. The battle was short, brutal, and decisive. Dex, fueled by a cold fury, moved with impossible speed, dispatching the remaining operatives with ruthless efficiency. When the last one fell, the amphitheater was silent save for the ragged breathing of the survivors and the distant echoes of the storm. Vyss emerged from behind the boulder, his face pale, his yellow eyes wide with disbelief. "Impossible," he whispered, looking at the fallen operatives. They were enhanced. They were unbeatable. "No one's unbeatable in the wasteland, Vyss," Dex said, his voice flat, his knife still dripping. "There's always a weakness, always a way." He pointed to the narrow fissure high above. "You picked a good defensive position, but you forgot about the vertical access, and you underestimated what desperation can teach a species." "What now, human?" Torven rumbled, stepping forward, his massive form casting a menacing shadow over Vyss. "Do we deliver you to the hegemony ourselves?" Dex shook his head. "No, we finish what we started. We get to the outpost." He looked at Vyss. "But you're coming with us. You're going to explain everything to the outpost commander, and then you're going to help us fix what you broke." Vyss scoffed. "I'll tell them nothing, and I certainly won't help you." "You will," Dex said, his voice devoid of emotion. He knelt beside one of the fallen operatives and retrieved a small, glowing device from their belt. "This is a Hegemony comlink, isn't it? Encrypted, long-range, direct line to your masters." He held it up. "I'm guessing it also has a self-destruct, and I'm guessing you don't want your masters knowing you failed, do you? Or that you were captured alive?" Vyss's eyes widened. The Hegemony was ruthless, and failure, especially captured failure, was not tolerated. Dex had found his leverage. "What do you want?" Vyss snarled. "Information," Dex replied. "Everything you know about the Hegemony's plans for Earth, and then you help us disable this jamming, and you help us get your ship's core systems back online. You're going to earn your survival, Vyss." The journey to the outpost resumed, but with a stark difference. Vyss, now bound and under constant watch by Torven, trudged sullenly ahead, his earlier arrogance replaced by a simmering resentment. Zara, still shaken but recovering, worked diligently on her device, trying to decipher the jamming signal with Vyss's reluctant assistance. Ellie remained vigilant, her medical skills now focused on the occasional minor injury sustained during the ambush, but her gaze rarely left Vyss. As they neared the outpost, the terrain began to change. The jagged peaks of the Thornback Mountains gave way to rolling hills, scarred but greener, dotted with the occasional hardy tree. The air, though still carrying the faint tang of ozone, felt cleaner, less oppressive. Then, through a break in the hills, they saw it. The outpost. It wasn't a gleaming city or a futuristic fortress. It was a collection of reinforced concrete structures, salvaged metal, and repurposed pre-war vehicles, all nestled within a deep valley. A tall, jury-rigged antenna stretched skyward, its dish slowly rotating. Smoke curled from a communal kitchen, and the faint sounds of human activity, voices, the clang of metal, the distant bark of a guard dog drifted on the wind. It was crude, resilient, and utterly human. "Primitive," Vyss muttered, his voice laced with disdain. "Home," Dex corrected, a rare, almost imperceptible softening in his grim expression. As they approached, a sentry on a watchtower spotted them. A moment later, a siren wailed and armed figures emerged from the outpost gates, their weapons raised. "Hold your fire," Dex shouted, raising his hands. "It's Patrol 7. I have guests." The gate opened slowly, revealing a grizzled man with a patch over one eye, his face a roadmap of old scars. Commander Thorn, the outpost leader. "Dex, what in the blazes?" Thorn's voice trailed off as his gaze fell upon Torven's massive form, Zara's shimmering eyes, and the bound Vyss, his single eye Wylian's. "Long story, Commander," Dex said, stepping forward. "The short version, crash-landed, needed help, and this one," he nudged Vyss with his foot, "is a saboteur working for something called the Hegemony. They've been jamming our comms." Thorn's face hardened. "Hegemony? We've been getting strange interference patterns for weeks. Thought it was just another storm." He looked at Vyss, then at Torven and Zara. "Are they with him?" "No," Torven rumbled, stepping forward, his voice surprisingly deep and resonant despite its gravely quality. "We are victims of his treachery. We seek only to repair our vessel and depart this world." Zara chittered, her prismatic eyes meeting Thorn's. "Our mission was scientific. Vyss betrayed us for profit." Thorn, a man who had seen humanity at its worst and best, seemed to take their measure. He looked at Dex, a silent question in his eye. Dex gave a subtle nod. "All right," Thorn said, lowering his weapon. "Bring them in. Secure the green one. And Dex, you and Ellie, report to my office. We have a lot to talk about. Over the next few days, the outpost became a hub of unprecedented activity. Vyss, under intense interrogation by Thorn and Dex, slowly began to reveal the Hegemony's true intentions. They weren't just interested in human survival capabilities, they saw Earth as a potential staging ground, a resource-rich world ripe for exploitation, its resilient inhabitants either to be enslaved or eliminated. Vyss had been an advanced scout tasked with assessing humanity's weaknesses and preparing the ground for a larger invasion force. Torven and Zara, meanwhile, worked tirelessly with the outpost's engineers, using their advanced knowledge to repair their damaged ship and, more importantly, to help the humans understand and counter the Hegemony's technology. Zara, a brilliant xenolinguist and technician, was invaluable in deciphering the Hegemony's jamming protocols and even adapting some of their own ship's systems to create a powerful, long-range counter-jamming signal. The outpost, once isolated, was now able to reach out to other scattered human settlements across the continent, warning them of the impending threat and sharing the newly acquired knowledge of Hegemony technology. Humanity, once fractured and fighting for mere survival, began to coalesce, united by a common enemy. One evening, as the twin moons cast their sickly light over the now bustling outpost, Dex stood with Torven and Zara, looking out at the wasteland. Their ship, though still scarred, was almost fully repaired, its crystalline hull gleaming under the harsh light. "You have given us much, human," Torven said, his voice softer than Dex had ever heard it. "Not just survival, but a new understanding of your species. We expected prey. We found warriors." "And builders," Zara added, her prismatic eyes reflecting the distant lights of the outpost. "You have taken a broken world and made it your own. You adapt, you endure, you thrive." "It's what we do," Dex replied, a faint smile on his lips. "We learned it the hard way." "The Hegemony will come," Torven said, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "They will not tolerate this defiance. They will send a fleet." "Let them," Dex said, his voice firm, his gray eyes reflecting the unyielding spirit of his people. "We'll be ready. You've given us the tools, the knowledge, and we've got 50 years of practice fighting for our home." Zara chittered and Torven translated. "She says your world has made you strong, stronger than any Hegemony force could imagine." "We'll prove it," Dex said. He looked at the vast, desolate landscape, then back at the outpost, a tiny beacon of defiance in the heart of the chaos. The fight was far from over, but for the first time in a long time, humanity had allies, knowledge, and a unified purpose. The next morning, Torven and Zara prepared for departure. Their ship, now fully operational, hummed with suppressed power. As they boarded, Torven paused at the ramp, turning to face Dex. "We will not forget this, human," he rumbled. "When the Hegemony comes, we will return, not as refugees, but as allies. Your world has taught us a valuable lesson. What lives on Earth is not meant to be weak." With a final respectful nod, Torven entered his ship. The ramp retracted, and the crystalline vessel rose silently into the amber sky, a beacon of hope and a promise of future alliance. It ascended higher and higher until it was just a shimmering speck, then vanished beyond the horizon. Dex watched it go, a sense of quiet satisfaction settling over him. The immediate threat was contained, the larger one understood. Humanity had faced its demons, both internal and external, and had emerged stronger, more united. The wasteland had forged them, and now they were ready to face the stars. The real test had just begun, but they would meet it, as they always had, together.